everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar about social media and uncovering the trends and customer opinions within social media. Um, we are Nexanet, and we're going to go through a couple introductions here, and then we'll go through the presentation. And please, if you have any questions, ask them as you go. Ariana, do you want to move to the next slide? And then as far as introductions go, my name, as I said, I'm Brian Atkins, Director of Applied Intelligence. Anne Erickson is our Analytics Manager of Real-Time Intelligence, and Ariana Patrick is a Analytics Manager as well, and they'll be going through the bulk of today's webinar. But just real quick, wanted to touch on, you can go to the next slide. Wanted to talk about how this is part of webinar 2 of our summer webinar series. So please, if you're registered, you should get an invite for the September 22nd one, and please join that one as well, as there's going to be some great content. And then just as far as who Nexanet is, just to provide some background for anyone who's not aware, we are a IT consulting organization with expertise in a number of different areas. So we provide solutions that revolve around customer experience and building out great customer experience applications and platforms. We also help our clients modernize their workplace with employee enablement solutions, automation, and networking and security. We have applied intelligence solutions, which are more around the data and analytics practices that our clients have, and that's where our social listening solutions fit within that. And then we also have cloud and hybrid IT solutions more around the data center and where any applications are hosted on and everything related to that. So that's just a real quick around like who Nexanet is, and now I will pass it off to Ariana, who will talk you through the rest of the social listening content.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. I'm Ariana Patrick. As Brian said, I'm a manager on the social listening team, and I'll be walking us through the first part of this presentation. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we're all on the same page of how we at Nexanet define social listening and clarify the differences between social monitoring and social listening. So you might have heard these terms used interchangeably, but we view them as two different practices. So first, we have social monitoring, and that's more of a reactive practice to tracking social activity, and that's only occurring on owned channels. So this might include tracking performance on your company's posts that you post on Instagram or Facebook, and you're seeing the comments, the likes, and the shares on those posts. And social monitoring is a really integral part of keeping tabs on your brand's social presence, but it really only provides a shallow understanding of the larger social universe that your brand or your company or your offering is operating under or within. So that takes us over to social listening. And social listening not only tracks what's happening on your own channels and your own channel's performance, but then also tracks the larger social universe of your brand. So at Nexanet, this means we can set up a project to track comments, posts, shares, likes, and mentions really of any keyword that we're tracking. So that means that this opens up tracking to organic conversations that are happening across social channels, things like Facebook pages, Reddit threads, hashtags on TikTok, tweets, whether or not these posts or mentions are explicitly tagging your company. So that allows you to be a lot more proactive in your research because you're understanding consumer conversations as they occur in real time, as they occur organically, and not just when they're interacting with your official company's online presence. And then lastly, it's also a relatively unbiased data set, again, because these conversations are occurring unprompted among peers, and they're not including the same response bias that you might get in a traditional market research survey. And it also provides insights into various social communities online. I think Anne and I are continually surprised by just who is talking online and what they're talking about. Sometimes we'll get a request and I'll think, ooh, I don't know if people are talking about that. And I've never not been able to find conversations on a topic. So really, there's forums, there's sites out there where people are talking about just about everything. Okay, and then that'll take us to layers of social listening. So when we look at social listening data, we think of 3 different levels of data. So first we have brand mentions, and this is going to be any mention of your brand or your specific product or offering that occurs on public social media. So this includes owned and earned mentions occurring on your company's socials, as well as organic mentions of your specific brand within the larger public social media space. So let's say you work in the pharma space and there's a Reddit thread dedicated specifically to talking about one of your company's drugs. Picking up all the mentions on that Reddit thread talking about that specific drug, that would be an example of brand level organic mentions. So they're talking about your brand, but they're just not interacting with your own company's channels online. And then next we have competitor mentions. So this broadens out our social listening search slightly by starting to track mentions of your competitors online. It allows us to start to compare and contrast differentiating factors between your company and your competitors. And then lastly, we have industry mentions. So industry mentions include the larger space that you and your competitors are working in. So here we're broadening out our listening approach to do things like start to identify consumer profiles, general sentiment of the industry that you're in, helping identify potential customers, maybe potential influencers or brand advocates. So with that, I'll hand it over to Anne, who's going to walk us through a little bit about building a social listening program.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Anne Erickson, and I'm an analytics manager at AnexaNet as well. So the first steps to building a successful social listening program starts with the business questions, usually. Whether it's discovering gaps in your brand strategy, illuminating consumer perceptions of your brand and products, there's a wide range of questions that we can address. And frequently, clients will have questions in mind already. They have questions that they want answered. They come to us for a reason, but it's not unusual for our team to consult with clients and work these things out ahead of time. At that point, then we go into data collection. So we use keywords primarily and some pretty high-level linguistic modeling. And this ensures that all the data returned is relevant, it's clean, it's useful. You know, we're getting rid of a lot of the noise. When we talk about social data, we mean the posts, comments, shares on any one of these platforms you see listed below. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, TikTok, and so forth. In addition to all of these sources, we also get news articles, comments on the articles, forums, blogs, you name it. And we also can layer in any data that you bring to the table. So call center data, survey data, IRI sales data. You know, we can layer that in, we can look at it, compare and contrast, and we can funnel that data into our categorization step. So once we have the data, that's when things get really fun. And we generally have some assumptions about the data, you know, so we come in with these business questions and we sort of know what we're looking for. We make assumptions about what we're going to see. So if we're in a pharmaceutical project, you know, we kind of assume that we're going to be looking at patient data, healthcare provider data, you know, caregivers as well. And so we kind of, you know, can expect to be slicing and dicing the data in certain ways. That said, this is also where we see what, you know, what else the data is telling us, the unknowns. And that gets really fun to work into our analysis and reporting. So this is where, you know, a lot of the magic happens. We can bridge our methodology and our expertise, and we can, you know, deliver these reports, you know, at weekly, monthly, quarterly, triannually. For real-time delivery, we can do Slack messaging, email alerting. We have also done automated text message, SMS messaging. And on occasion, we'll just call up our clients on the phone as well, especially if it's a particularly sensitive issue that they want to, you know, they need to know immediately. So yeah, that's essentially, you know, soup to nuts, beginning to end. I may be biased, but I think the business advantages of social listening are pretty broad. But these are some of the top business advantages. So organic and unbiased data, traditional market research methods, as Ariana mentioned earlier, are often plagued by different forms of bias. So for example, using a pharmaceutical project, you know, patients on a drug trial may not be inclined to be reporting accurately if they want to remain on a drug they think is working for them. And so, you know, this doesn't have that same sort of problem. It's peer-to-peer, everything is voluntary, it's unguided, people are freely offering up their opinions and their ideas and their experiences, and we can collect that and pass it on and make sure that everyone benefits from the information that's being posted online. It's also much faster than traditional market research methods, so it can be launched in a much more, a much faster timeline. You get your results faster, and so you can act on it more quickly. So you know, the cost savings actually could be pretty efficient in terms of, you know, choosing the data that's already there, you know, going online. Public and word of mouth. So this is also really, really great. So all the mentions that we get are public. We don't collect any private data. So, you know, if your profile's on private, we can't reach that data, which is fine because there's plenty out there anyway. And a lot of people are turning into this. People want to know what other people are saying. You know, we're all humans, and this is how humans interact. And so it's you know, word of mouth tends to spread fast, and it spreads far, and that can generally be, you know, greater impact online than in person necessarily. It also could impact spending behaviors. So, you know, if you hear it through a couple other resources, you know, people tend to listen more effectively, you know, to what's happening online. Yeah. Ariana, if you go into the next one, we can talk about some applications. So risk management. This happens to be, you know, this is a real-time offering that we do, and it's wonderful. It's really beneficial. We sometimes do this up to, you know, between 16 and 24 hours a day for some clients, depending on what you need. You know, we can tailor that. We have a 5-minute average alert delivery time via Slack or email. And this is especially useful for high-risk events, potentially viral events that happen online concerning your brand. For example, a couple years ago, there was a shooting on the West Coast, and an influential journalist posted a tweet claiming that the shooting had taken place on our client's US campus, which happened to also be on the West Coast. We immediately notified our client. We sent an email alert, but we also followed up on the phone because they were located in Europe and it was the middle of the night over there. And so within minutes, they were able to issue a statement correcting the misinformation. They, you know, and it blew over. You know, it was a non-issue. They were able to extricate themselves from that narrative by correcting the information. So misinformation, employee behavior, cyber threats, you know, all of these are very acute examples of things that could potentially, you know, threaten your company or your brand in physical or non-physical ways. Similarly, another great application that we've been seeing is this employee sentiment and oversight. You know, we are all remote right now. But a lot of the people who aren't remote right now are frontline workers. And that's been the case for a long time. You know, people who are engaging with your customers on a daily basis, you know, and social listening can identify, of course, instances of employee excellence, which is wonderful. But just as easily, it can identify when your employees are, you know, out of compliance with your company standards. This is a great example for a telecommunications company we worked for. We identified these two separate posts on opposite ends of the country within 3 days of each other of two employees urinating on consumer property. And these events were videotaped with their Nest cams and their Ring cams. So, you know, the consumers had this footage. They were very mad. They posted it on Twitter. We were able to identify these posts, notify our client, and you know, everybody in that organization received a refresher course on how to appropriately relieve oneself while on the job. They also gave some very generous credits to these consumers, and fortunately, these events did not go viral, but they had the potential to be very viral posts. You know, people would think this was very amusing generally, but because we were on top of it and our client was able to correct and you know, use the information that we gave them, they went nowhere. It did, you know, it just fizzled out. So understanding, you know, how your employees are working with your consumers and making sure that everyone comes out of those engagements, you know, happy is something, you know, that social listening can help with. Ariana, back to you.
Thanks, Anne. So I'll walk through a few more applications of social listening. Another great use of social listening is for market research purposes. So this includes understanding social conversations occurring in the larger market that you're operating under. So some of the best use cases for market research social listening include things like identifying consumer interests, creating consumer profiles, understanding pain points of consumers in the market that you're in, and then also product innovation. So I'll walk through an example of a market research project that we did for Villanova University, which is also my alma mater, so go Cats if there's any Wildcats on here. But Villanova was interested in understanding more about the prospective student decision process that students and families go to when choosing to attend where to go to college. And so they came to us with kind of a broad idea of what they wanted to take a look at. And like Anne said, you know, we're happy to work with you to figure out, you know, what business questions might be most useful to look at in the social data. So we ended up analyzing conversations from both prospective students and parents on public forums. And we took a look at, you know, first, where were students and parents going to seek out information? So what forums, what websites were trusted sources of information during this time? And then on those forums that were popular, were there any influential voices, strong opinions that were coming out about Villanova or their top competitors? And then lastly, students who were considering Villanova or similar schools, you know, what were their values? What was their decision process? What were the things that they were looking for in a college? What were they directly comparing and contrasting from Villanova to other schools? So by looking at this larger market in general of future college students and their parents, you know, we were able to take a look at just that stressful experience of choosing where to go to school, and then from there sort of dial in on the specific experience of considering Villanova and potentially eventually attending Villanova. And so relaying that information back to them, that helped inform their marketing materials. It helped inform better understanding just the general experience that families are going through when choosing where to attend college. And then a second example I'll touch on for market research is product innovation. So we had an outdoor company come to us, and they were interested in creating a new product specifically for their fishing equipment department. And so again, this really shows that any community has a presence online. We were tapping into conversations of ice fishermen, and I thought, I don't think that's out there. I'm not so sure, but we found it. There was, there were specific forums and websites dedicated to people talking about ice fishing and fishing in general. And so we were able to tap into these forums of people passionately discussing their fishing experiences, their general, the specific joys, and then the pain points too that they had during their fishing experience and with specific equipment. And so through this, we were able to detect a few specific unmet needs, things like lack of good GPS while on the water, being difficult to log like hotspots in a lake or on a river where the fishing is good, and then also batteries dying quickly on motors. And so these, specific pain points we were able to relay back to our client. They were able to combine that with some of the other market research methods that they were conducting in this space in order to decide, what product space they wanted to work in and what product they wanted to move forward in creating. Okay, and then the last application of social listening that I'll talk through is brand insights. So brand insights taps into conversations occurring on your specific product across social channels. So this can help you understand your consumer base, who are your loyal customers, what do your loyal customers look like, what do people like and dislike about your product or your company, also who could be a potential influencer for promoting your product. And the reason that social listening is really great to answer these questions is because, again, we're tapping into these conversations that are occurring organically. And I think, my favorite and a really good example of this is we were examining conversations around adherence to a pharmaceutical drug. So our client had found that in some other market research efforts that patients weren't great at adhering to the dosage schedule of this particular drug, but the answers as to why kind of seemed to be all over the place. They weren't super related. There wasn't a strong reason that they could figure out why patients weren't adhering to this specific drug. So they came to us to see what conversations were occurring online about adherence, and through multiple different, specifically Reddit thread conversations, we saw that a ton of patients were saying that they would often skip a dose of this drug when they wanted to consume alcohol or have a few drinks with friends. And so what was interesting about these conversations is that, we saw patients admitting being embarrassed or being worried about wanting to bring that concern up with their doctor. So they were going to each other to kind of get this peer-to-peer advice and experience to say, have you done this? What do you do when you want to have a drink? This is what I do. And so because of sort of that, that information was being held back from their healthcare providers and from revealing it specifically on surveys, it wasn't being picked up in any other market research approach, but we were able to detect, a strong driver for the reason for why patients weren't adhering to this particular drug dosage schedule. And then another great use case for brand insights is helping to identify influential voices that mention your product or brand. We can frequently, we can identify influencers or potential partners for promoting your products. We can easily search for influencers or celebrities that discuss your brand, identify potential influencers, track their progress, compare and contrast different influencers that you might have partnered with, talking with your brand. And so with that, that is our overview of social listening and how here at AnnextNet we approach social listening. So I want to transition to have time for some questions.
Great, and just for anyone that is aware, there should be the question box on your screen. If you do have any questions, feel free to type them in. We've got a few already. So I think one of the first questions that came through is, what are the privacy implications of social listening, and how do you deal with the changing, aspect of consumer privacy?
That's a great question. I can start it off.
Do you want to take that one? Yeah.
Sure. So the first thing to think about is all of the data that we're collecting is public social media data. So we're not able to collect any data that might be on a private profile, is in a password protected forum, or is posted with the intent of remaining private. And so right away, that keeps us in line with any privacy laws, because the data that we're looking at was posted with the intent of being public, and we're only listening to public data. On the other side of that, we're continually making sure that we are in line with following greater privacy laws such as the CCPA and GDPR, and all of the tools that we use for social listening are compliant in following the rules and regulations set forth by those larger privacy laws. So we follow the larger privacy laws, and then ourselves, we make sure that we're respecting the data and everything is public.
Sure. Yeah, and that's great. I think it sounds like the public nature of it does mean that the access to that data, the privacy implications are a little less, but we are able to follow the ever-changing regulations that seem to be occurring.
Yeah.
So one other question that came in is what sort of tools do you use to perform social listening?
Yeah, so we currently we use a platform called Brandwatch. We are pretty well versed in all of the available platforms, really. About every year or so, we perform a platform evaluation. We look at the available tools, we evaluate our methodology, we check out, who privacy concerns, how they handle their data, whether they're compliant with these rules. That's a factor in our evaluation. We also look at their capabilities for categorization and analysis, the ease of use of their tools, whether they have an intuitive UI or whether, we also take into consideration their data coverage. What platforms do they get? How much of these platforms do they get? Is it a reliable platform, and so forth? So, we spend quite a lot of time making sure that the tools that we do use are, first in class, the best ones that we can, find and use. And if we need to change, we make sure that we do that as well. We recently added a couple new data streams, and we are learning another platform, and we're trying to, we're figuring out how to fit it in, because it's it's something that our clients want. More data, the more the merrier. And that's that's how we do it. We just make sure that we're we do a lot of research, and we are very well familiar with most of the platforms out there, and excited to learn more as they come out.
Great. Yeah, and then so there's one final question I have here, unless anyone has any additional ones to add in. related to, the work that we do. Is it limited to just the United States or just the English language, or is there other languages that can be identified and listened to as well?
Yeah, we can do social listening much broader than just English speaking in the United States. So we can tap into conversations that are occurring all over the world in all different languages. We can also do sentiment analysis on, I believe, 50 different languages. The way that we typically do that is we'll bring in a translation service to help us, unless we've got some analysts. I think we have Spanish and French, a few others that we can tap into, but if not, we'll enlist a translation service to help us understand what's being said all around the world. And if there is interest in just looking at English language posts, there still are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of posts being made in English that are still occurring all around the world. So if there's not a desire to bring in the translation services, that's another way that we can do it. And just taking a step back on the post level, we're typically able to see where the post is being made. So whether it's being made from the US or from the UK or a specific country in Europe or Asia. And so that's another way that we can filter down the data location wise, just beyond just the US. And I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Well, we've done multilingual projects in the past. Some companies are across the globe, and speaking from experience, one of my clients right now, there's a significant portion of their clientele who are Spanish-speaking Americans, and they engage with this company, with this brand, in both English and Spanish, and we can analyze that, and we can include that as part of the reporting.
Great. Yeah. And so I guess at this point, I want to thank everyone for coming, and Ariana and Anne, thank you guys for the content and the presentation. As said in the beginning, this is the second of 3 webinars, but the third webinar will be on September 22nd, how your employee experience affects your customer experience. So please don't miss that. And then also, I think, Ariana, for anyone who attended this webinar, they'll receive a complimentary social media analysis.
Correct. So Anne and I, or someone on our team, will be reaching out to the attendees on this call, and we'll be providing a complimentary social media analysis of your brand. So we'll hop on a call with you just to understand, what might be most interesting to you to have us take a look at in the social space. And then we'll provide a high-level overview of your brand's presence on social media. So it'll include both some quantitative and qualitative metrics. It'll be a few slides and just give you, a little bit of a snippet or a look behind the curtain of what's being discussed about. We could either do your brand in general, we could do a specific product, a specific offering program, whatever it may be, and pull in some information to let you know what's being discussed online. So be on the lookout for an email from someone on our team discussing that.
Great. So so thanks everyone for joining today, and hopefully we'll be in touch and we'll talk about that complimentary analysis.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.